Good morning, Rowan. It's the morning of the 10th of October 2015 and it's about 8:30 in the morning. You've probably been missing me over the last few days, so I'm making you a new video today to cheer you up. And I'm going to be talking about a lecture you gave about St Teresa of Avila and Thomas Merton at Dedham Parish Church on the 29th of October 2015. I don't know anything about Thomas Merton, so I'm concentrating on Teresa of Avila, who I do know a considerable amount about because I wrote my thesis about St John of the Cross, who was a very good friend of hers and fellow Carmelite reformer. And I have a third of a chapter dedicated to St Teresa, and she's also mentioned in other places as well. I don't have time to cover the whole of what you said about St Teresa in this video because you did say some quite bizarre things, quite a lot of quite bizarre things, even though you only spoke about her for 25 minutes. So I will be making more videos later on to cover some more points. Anyway, without further ado, I'll kick off now. She was a woman who claimed the authority to teach about prayer, and in the 16th century the Spanish Inquisition had very clear ideas what to do about women who claimed the authority to teach about prayer. Well, what were those very clear ideas? Are you going to tell us? No, of course you're not. This is one of your impressionistic statements, isn't it? To try and cast the Spanish Inquisition in a bad light, like they were going to burn her at the stake or something like that, just because she was teaching about prayer. This is particularly bizarre in the case of St Teresa, because she was actually friends with members of the Inquisition and was supported by them, and also supported by the diocesan authorities. And it was members of her own order who opposed her, really, because they were against the reforms she was seeking to institute. Anyway, I'm going to make a short quotation from my thesis now. It's from page 46 of my thesis. You can read it in Leeds University Library if you want to check. So this quotation is referring to her autobiography, the first draft of which was finished in 1562. So this is a quotation now. It was written in consultation with the Inquisitor of Toledo, Francisco de Soto y Salazar, who assured her there was nothing unorthodox in it that would warrant official investigation. And there's a footnote there, footnote number 80, and if we look at that, what it says is Williams, Rowan, Teresa of Avila, Continuum, London, 2000, page 42. So you knew that she was friends with the Inquisition. I have read your book 2 or 3 times actually. The biographical information is pretty good, but the rest of it is total rubbish. Anyway, so why would you be making statements like that unless you were trying to give a certain political impression? Anyway, moving on. She was from a Jewish family. She wasn't, you know, she was from a Catholic family. Her grandfather was Jewish, so 2 generations removed. One of her 4 grandparents was Jewish. And the Jewish race and faith is matrilinear, so it's having a Jewish mother that makes you Jewish anyway. You also do say later on she was a convert Jewess. Well, this is quite patently false. I can't imagine why you would want to say a thing like that. She wasn't a convert anything. She was born a Catholic, she died a Catholic, and she was a Catholic all her life. And she was a Catholic nun. If you want to give a talk about a Catholic nun and saint who was a convert Jewess, then why don't you give a talk about Edith Stein? instead of just making up rubbish about St Teresa of Avila. Well, what a strange man. Anyway, you say her father's neighbours had produced the documentation proving he was Jewish when Teresa was 5 years old. Well, that would have been 1520 because she was born in 1515. His neighbours would have had a lot of trouble producing documentation proving he was Jewish since he wasn't. They could have proved that he had a Jewish father, but they couldn't have proved that he was Jewish because he was a Catholic. And there was a lot of sensitivity about pure blood, which was a bit ridiculous anyway, because there was so much intermarriage going on between Christians and Jews and Muslims in Spain in the Middle Ages that there was hardly anybody with pure blood. Anyway. So we're talking about 1520 now, the period around 1520, and you say this was at a time when Spain was becoming more and more paranoid about racial and religious purity, when Jews and Muslims were being driven out of Spain in large quantities. Those who remained were forcibly converted, and even after that seriously harassed. Well, in 1492, after the fall of Granada, Jews were given 3 months to either leave Spain or convert to Christianity. So we're talking about 1520, and in 1492 Jews were given 3 months to convert or leave. So that was 30 years previously. So there was hardly any left by 1520, if any at all. So to say that this was happening more and more at that time is just patently false. And also, I mean, Muslims, after the fall of Granada, which was a peaceful event, they were told that they would be able to continue practicing their faith. And as it happened, this didn't occur. They were also forced to convert or leave by 1502. So that was nearly 20 years before 1520. So to say that this was happening more and more with either Jews or Muslims around the time of 1520 just isn't true, because the issue of conversion or leaving had already been resolved at least 18 years previously. It is true that people who converted and stayed were being harassed, probably to solve petty grievances rather than because of any real concern about religious purity, so to speak. So Jews, for example, were often brought before courts for things like wearing their best clothes on Saturdays, because people thought that they were reverting to Jewish customs because the Jewish Sabbath is on Saturday. And Muslims could also be brought before courts for things like taking baths, because it's a Muslim custom to wash before praying. So people would accuse them of reverting to their previous religion if they adopted simple practices like this. But to say it was happening more and more, I think, is an exaggeration, particularly in relation to people being forced to convert or leave, because that had already previously happened. Anyway, moving on. You're talking about St Teresa now. She was an extremely flighty girl. She was compulsively flirtatious. Rowan, you've just made that up. You've made it up. You've made it up. Compulsively flirtatious. You've made it up. I don't blame you for not quoting sources in a lecture, but you couldn't quote a source for that because there isn't one. You've just made it up. You know, I've read all the works of Saint Teresa. All her books, all her poems, all her lectures. Letters, rather, sorry, not lectures. There's very little other information about the period of her life that you're talking about when she was a girl, other than her autobiography. And it certainly doesn't say she was compulsively flirtatious. You like fantasising about things like that, don't you? Anyway, you also say in her late teens she was involved in a rather dramatic love affair. And that this got tongues wagging. Well, you've made that up as well. She wasn't involved in any love affair. You know, like I said, the main source of information about that period of her life is her autobiography. There's very little detail anywhere else. So this is what she has to say about the things that she believes went wrong in her life when she was a teenager. I began to wear finery and to begin to wish to charm by my appearance. I took great care of my hands and my hair, using perfumes and all the vanities I could obtain, and I obtained plenty of them, for I was very persistent. I had no bad intentions, because I should not have wished anyone to sin against God because of me. This excessive care of my appearance, together with other practices which I did not think wicked, lasted for many years, and now I see how wrong these must have been. That's from her autobiography, Chapter 2, Part 2. And she also talks about the bad influence of some of her cousins, and this is what she says. I had some cousins who were the only people who were allowed to enter my father's house. He was very careful about this, and would to God that he had been careful about them too. For I now see the danger of conversation at an age when the virtues should be beginning to grow, with those who do not recognise the vanity of the world, but encourage one to give oneself up to it. They were about my own age, or a little older. I kept conversing with them about everything that pleased them, and I heard their accounts of the affections and follies, which were anything but edifying. What was worse, my soul became exposed to what has been the source of all its troubles. So that really doesn't sound like a love affair, does it? That's also from her autobiography, Chapter 2, Part 2. You can look it up if you want. Oh dear, you are funny. Anyway, I do want to make two further comments, two small comments. You do really emphasise the word paranoid when you say, at a time when Spain was becoming more and more paranoid. So I think you're having another dig. But I'm not bothered, you know, because you're just conforming to type, aren't you? You're trying to isolate me so I depend on you by trying to turn everybody against me. And, you know, blaming your victim, calling your victim paranoid for pointing out all the evil things that you've done. You're just conforming to type. It's the kind of thing all abusers do. So if you think you're shutting me up with that, you're very much mistaken. A convert Jewess, when she quite clearly wasn't, and you know that she wasn't. Now then, what does Judith mean? Oh yes, Jewess. Well, have a nice day, Rowan, and don't forget, today could be the day. So be alert.